Here is Steve Schmidt, Republican, conservative, founder of the Lincoln Project, a great American, and he's giving the analysis of the emergency that's happening right now with respect to democracy in America. Let's listen to what he has to say, and the others.
Asserting autocrats. And so when 126 of them have crossed that line, asserting that Donald Trump won an election that they all, every one of them, except a handful of truly, truly crazy ones, know for sure intellectually that in fact Joe Biden won. Right? That the fact that they did that they're willing to poison American democracy means that there's two sides in this political debate in this country, and that American politics is realigned. There's a pro-democracy coalition, and there's another side. And on that other side, which is trying to throw out hundreds of thousands of black votes to keep Trump in power, who's faithless to the ideas and ideals of American democracy, we can never lose another presidential election to these people again, because maybe next time the leader will be more able, more competent, and the plan will look more detailed and more organized and less like a farce. But this is a dangerous hour we find ourselves in a country, and nobody should be naive about that.
Steve Schmidt, do you have any doubt that Donald Trump would have stolen this election if at any of these junctures, either the recounts or the legal challenges or harassing and pressuring the electors, and I think Pence has a role to play next week. I mean, do you have any doubt that it was Trump's intention to steal the election?
I have no doubt at all. The unknown in this equation is how many people would cross that river with him that would seek to repudiate the American idea and ideal and the sacrifice of 13 generations of American patriots in blood who gave us our American birthright. None at all. What's surprising is how many people did it with them, that we have 17 or 18 out of 25 Republican attorney generals signed on to this nonsense to disenfranchise the will of the American people. It was rejected and they lost, but we now know that a very substantial part of the Republican political establishment in this country is hostile to democracy. We've never seen something like this before. So like we're seeing all over the world, we have seen the conservative movement metastasize into this populist menace that's come out of the other side with a lot of fascistic markers, that's autocratic and is not faithful to the ideas of American democracy, which have bound both parties together for all of their history, and before that, through the 244-year history of the United States.
Claire McCaskill, I want to bring you in on this, and I associate myself with both of your suggestion that this is a happy day, but I do think that what Joe Biden is now responsible for governing is not the same country that I think any of us thought we lived in 4 years ago or before this GOP-sponsored coup attempt. And it was a failure, but attempted homicide is still a crime, technically and legally speaking, that you can go to jail for. And this was a failed coup, but it was an attempted coup with violence in places and threat of violence in places well beyond the Beltway. I want to read to you some of the reporting about what's happening at the Michigan State Capitol today. This is NBC's reporting. The Michigan Capitol and the state legislature will be shut down on Monday per legislative officials on Sunday night because of, quote, credible threats of violence and expected protests related to the meeting of Michigan's 16 state electors on Monday. The Michigan State Senate workspaces were also closed, and the Michigan Senate Majority Leader spokeswoman, Amber McCann, said this, quote, the decision was made not because of anticipated protests, but was made based on credible threats of violence. It's more than an assault on the idea and ideals of democracy. It's a, quote, credible threat of violence against people carrying out the necessary and constitutionally mandated steps of our democratic process, Claire.
Yeah, and here's the thing. I am so sick and tired of begging Republicans to step up and do the right thing. I'm just Warren Slick trying to get them to step up. But at this moment, we are now careening towards someplace that's dangerous. I mean, let's think about for a minute the hypocrisy of the Republicans talking about religious liberty and talking about how we have to protect the First Amendment and religious liberty. We have to really, because it's under assault by the left. The Proud Boys, a group of thugs, marauders, were roaming around Washington over the weekend under cover of darkness, ripping banners off churches. Now let's just let that sink in. They were ripping banners off churches. Now, a church has the right to put a banner on their edifice. They have a right to their freedom of speech as they see it in the practice of their religion. The notion that we've heard nothing from these hypocrites about religious freedom. We've got a candidate down in Georgia lecturing a man of God who preaches from Martin Luther King's pulpit every Sunday, lecturing him about his sermons, and we have the Proud Boys ripping banners off churches, and there's nothing that's being said. It is unbelievable. And if you listen to the words at those rallies, and I did, it was chilling. They are telling people to take up arms. They are calling for martial law. It is now time. This is not, oh, let it run its course, and can't afford to really make the hardcore Trump base mad. Somebody's going to get killed, Nicole. And, we already had Proud Boys in a knife altercation as they were attacking a black man who was by himself in Washington over the weekend, and he struck out with a knife trying to protect himself. So it is really very dangerous right now in terms of the rhetoric that the president of the United States is embracing. And come on, maybe the Republicans in the Senate didn't sign on this ridiculous Looney Tunes lawsuit that went to the Supreme Court, but they're still too damn quiet. They need to speak up.
Yamiche, I want to just move the goalpost on this. They're not quiet because they don't have the courage at this point, Claire. I think they're quiet because they're fine with it. I don't think there's anything else to detect. And I think that when you look at the reporting, and Yamiche, I want to ask you about this. The Times is reporting that Trump's not done, nowhere close to done. As the president continues to refuse to concede, a small group of his most loyal backers in Congress is plotting a final stage challenge on the floor of the House of Representatives in early January to try to reverse Biden's victory. The fight promises to shape how Trump's base views the election for years to come and to pose yet another awkward test of allegiance for Republicans who have privately hoped that the Electoral College vote this week would be the final word on the election result. I mean, if we're testing Republicans, Yamiche, I will give you the answers. In the crossword puzzle, they're upside down and backwards. Let me put them into focus. The Republicans will fail. The Republicans are Trump's servants, slaves, whatever you want to call them, but they are now soldiers in the war against democracy. And the silence today and the silence in the face of everything Claire just described is proof of it. They now no longer are sort of the kinds of politicians who get on the record when they fear violence, which used to be a tripwire for any politician at any level, federal, state, or local. A tripwire used to be a concern of violence. The Republicans seem to have long passed that, and I wonder if you're picking up any concern from any corners of the Trump White House staff or the Republicans in Congress or anybody that you cover.
The number one thing I hear from people, Republicans in particular, when I put the question to them, aren't you speaking? Why aren't you saying more? They say, what do you expect us to do? What do you want us to do? Republicans are in this situation where they are in some ways, at least based on my reporting, almost in denial of the fact that they can speak out against President Trump and have some sort of significant impact. They make it seem as though when President Trump is out here and his supporters are out here doing all of this stuff, inciting violence, saying all these things that are clearly not true, that they somehow are just hostages in a party where President Trump has all of the power. So I think in some ways that might be them making an excuse, but I think it's not surprising that you see in the New York Times that reporting that President Trump will try some last-ditch effort that will surely fail again, because there is no one that is going to try to tell President Trump or even can tell President Trump, stop. It's time to stop. It's time to move on. It's time, as Joe Biden said, to turn the page. We just don't see that happening. Instead, what you see is a GOP that is going to continue to back President Trump, even when it's January 21st and President Trump is still whistling into the wind and no longer in the White House. You're going to expect that some of these Republicans are going to continue to back the president. Yes, maybe it's because they're scared of their own base. Maybe it's because, as critics say, they're cowards and don't want to speak about this. Maybe it's because some of them actually fundamentally believe what the president's saying. Whatever the case is, I don't think what we're seeing is going to change much at all. In fact, and I think that, we say that a lot, but I think in some ways, this is a moment in time where American democracy was really, really tried. It was almost broken in some ways. And even the end, we saw that the elected officials, and I should say some elected officials, some Republicans, were standing by the president. We also, of course, have seen the state Republicans, like the governor of Georgia, who, by the way, isn't exactly a hero to many, but he's someone who is refusing to do even some of the things that the president's doing, saying he should do, and the president's already lashing out at him.
It is the best summary of the state of the Republican Party that I've heard in a long time. Yamiche Alcindor, thank you so much for starting us off. Claire and Steve are sticking around for more. When we come back, more on the incredible scientific feat of already delivering nearly 3 million vaccines into the arms of Americans. They're attempting to get that done this week. We'll look at the outlook for the rest of us, the rest of the country, and the victory lap Donald Trump appears to be trying to take around that. Plus, Michigan today, as we've been reporting, ahead of its electoral vote, was on edge with protests outside the state capitol and legislative buildings closed due to those credible threats of violence over the election. We'll get a live report from there. And those electoral college votes were supposed to be a non-event, a procedural milestone, an afterthought. But this is Donald Trump. So we'll get Steve Kornacki back in the big board to help explain and show us the state-by-state march toward Joe Biden's now closely watched procedural victory there. All those stories still coming up. Don't go anywhere.